Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 156, cover dated April 1982. And the cover here is one that puts front and center the Starjammers. Corsair there at the front and the rest of the team behind him. And I like the design by Cockrum here, where we have this particular arc ascending up to Chode and then all the way down here to Storm. It's nicely arranged, the composition. So this is the third part of an ongoing storyline featuring the Shi'ar and the abduction of Empress Lilandra. I'll open this one up to, by the way, this is inked by Bob Wiacek. Open this one up to the splash page. And so there's a lot of catching up for readers for whom this might be their first issue of what has happened in the previous couple of issues over the initial pages of the comic. And this splash page is in many ways a reconfiguration of the cover to the previous issue. So we have Colossus here in his human form, apparently dead. He's been skewered by Deathbird with this particular spear here. And we get a piece of dialogue from Wolverine that, for me anyway, doesn't ring true, where he says Deathbird did this, and by all I hold holy, she's going to pay. The going to pay part, that sounds like Wolverine. The all he holds holy, it's a Claremont type phrase, but it doesn't really suit Wolverine and his character. The creative team, well, the title of the story is Pursuit, this particular chapter of this ongoing story. And the creative team is Chris Claremont, writer, Dave Cockrum, penciler, Bob Wiacek, finisher in inks, Janice Chang on the letters, and Don Warfield on colours. So it is a nice splash page, and I particularly like the body language and the expression that Cockrum has drawn on Storm's face as well, and the way that her arms are just kind of hanging at her sides as well. It really captures her shock and grief as well, in the belief that Colossus is dead. But turn the page and it'll turn out that there's a pulse. So, of course, he's not dead. So in classic comics fashion, the cliffhanger at the end of the previous issue was not 100% true in what it was implying to us. And Wolverine, nonetheless, is skeptical as to whether they can help Colossus, whether he's going to be able to be helped by human medicine. We have Tigra here. She's a member of the Avengers. And at the end of the previous issue, NYPD turned up in order to arrest everybody. And she's going to deal with them as an Avenger. And she begins to say to them, my associates and I were doing our job, so you can't arrest us. But the NYPD officer isn't really listening to her. And then we switch scenes to the FAA, Regional Air Traffic Control Center. And what I really like here in the art is the color hold for the computer screens of the operatives here in the traffic control center. And we've got this particular guy here, his name is Phil, and he's looking at his screen and he's saying, I've been a controller for 20 years, Marty. I've never had a moment like that, and I never want to again. That was in relation to 154, when you had the Sidri, what would I call it again, like composite craft, that was chasing the X-Men's Blackbird around Manhattan. So that was a tough day for him. And now he sees this gigantic reading on the screen. And now there's a little bit, this is interesting because Cockrum worked Marvel style with Claremont. So Claremont and he discussed the plot. Cockrum went away and did the storytelling and the pencils. And my sense is that sometimes maybe Cockrum would send something to Claremont that Claremont hadn't 100% asked for, and maybe he was trying to interpret what he was looking at. So this doesn't quite look like Phil here is conking out on the console. It looks like he's hammering it in frustration, but in the dialogue around him, the idea is that he's keeled over, like he's conked out, he's gone unconscious, he's had a heart attack, something, he's fainted. So they're all aghast at this massive reading on the screen. This is an interesting panel here where we get a shot of Manhattan from the perspective of the East River here, and we see the Twin Towers there and the bridges as well. So we've got I think that would be the Brooklyn Bridge, and it's interesting just to see that the way that Cockrum has laid this out. So he's divided the shot into 3 panels, implying the shadow that is covering the city and covering the island in its shadow. But also what I'm interested in here in Wiacek's inks, Wiacek is using a brush to ink this, and you can see here that he's limited in the amount of detail he can put into those buildings because of the tool he's using. But when he switches to pen, as he will do with Paul Smith, he would be able, if he came back to this, to put in a lot more detail. So it's kind of the era and the bunch of tools that the artists were using, that you would get a certain limitation on the amount of detail that could be worked in to the art compared to the mid to late 80s and into the 90s, when everybody was using pens like microns and so on and so forth. You can get a lot more detail in. So you get a crowd reaction here to this craft. What is it going to be? Well, it turns out for long-time readers to be the Starjammers ship. No, well, the name of the Starjammer ship is the Starjammer, and a great gleaming starship hovering above the city, seemingly close enough to touch. I like the little detail here of the Empire State Building, where you can see that the Empire State Building is dwarfed by the size of the Starjammer. So we have a bit of the Starjammer behind it, and also in front of it here, so that you really get a sense of how huge this starship is. And then we've got that upshot where we've got this magenta tractor beam that envelops Corsair and the 4 X-Men, and they disappear into the ship. And then as quickly as it had arrived, the spacecraft disappears as well. And I like that kind of indication of it zooming out into the upper atmosphere with the magenta sweep behind it. And I really like this little bit of characterization from Claremont here concerning Tigra. So she's left behind, and she thinks to herself, good luck, X-Men, I have a feeling you'll need it. And Claremont could have just left it at that, but he doesn't. He includes some characterization of her, and this is it in this thought balloon here. I wish I could have gone with you. I like that. I like that little detail. That's pure Claremont, and it adds something else to this little scene that goes beyond just the plot trajectory. So they're aboard the Starjammer there. Then we've got the crew. So we have all the different characters. We learn all their names in the course of the issue. So we've got Chode there, we've got Sikorsky, we've got Raza, we've got Hepzibah, and we've got Waldo. So one thing that I noted just as I began the video, and I was looking at the cover, is I've forgotten the name of this little creature that sits always on Chode's shoulder. Does anybody know its name? I mean, I'll find out after the video, but yeah, if you know the name, put it in the comments to this particular review and video, because we don't learn its name, and it's an intriguing little creature, and it adds a little bit of whimsy to the Starjammers. So Colossus is put into a medical unit that will stabilize his body functions, so he's going to be all right, and Waldo, or so rather Sikorsky, is going to look after him. But there's a little bit of melodrama here, where Corsair, the ship's captain, says to Cyclops, it's out of our hands, Colossus's fate. All we can do is watch and wait and pray. But, like, he'll be okay, yes? And then we switch scenes to the Shi'ar dreadnought that is in Earth orbit. And aboard that particular ship is Nightcrawler and Kitty Pryde. And Kitty Pryde has been playing around with this piece of machinery that will change her costumes. So she's having fun there, but she and Nightcrawler also have a plan in order to take over the ship. Kitty has already infiltrated the computer system by virtue of information that Professor X covertly communicated to her telepathically before he left to go to Earth. So the Shi'ar are unaware of all of that, and simply they're observing what's going on there. But this particular guy says, regarding the question by the Admiral as to whether there's any problems, none. They're model prisoners. So the Shi'ar haven't twigged to Nightcrawler and Kitty's plan, though the child's non-stop prattle will probably either bore you to death or drive you mad, or both. I like that. I like that little joke, because sometimes, like teenage Kitty, like she's 13 and a half, in this period of Marvel continuity, she can be annoying, just as teenagers often are, yes? And then the Admiral, Samadar is his name, he communicates with Nightcrawler and Kitty via this three-dimensional hologram field, which suddenly pops to life. And I like this little line of dialogue from him as well. It's like classic villain dialogue. Greetings, X-Men. I trust our accommodations are satisfactory, because they are in effect prisoners. While the X-Men are on Earth, they've got 24 hours to find and rescue Empress Lilandra. So Nightcrawler, a little frostily, says, "To what do we owe the honor of your call?" And then the Admiral gets to it. "I thought you would appreciate an update on your comrades' progress. Their foe is the Shi'ar renegade Deathbird. Corsair and Storm would most surely have been slain had it not been for the X-Men's timely arrival." So again, this is recalling events in the previous issue, but something I want to point out in the art is just the limitation, again, regarding detail when you're inking with a brush. So you can see the brush actually works very well on the feathers, Deathbird's feathers, but there's a certain limit on how much detail you can work in there compared to later comics where the tool set was different. And then they get a replay of Colossus being hit by the acid and later on being speared by Deathbird. So of course that shocks Kitty, because Kitty has feelings for Colossus. And Nightcrawler wants to know, is Colossus dead or alive? You must know that. But the Admiral says, "Regrettably, I do not know. A malfunction prevented our recording of any subsequent events." He's lying, though. And so Kitty here thinks to herself, that's a good expression on her face as well, in Cockrum's pencils and Wiacek's finishes. So she thinks, "Oh, Peter, I want to cry, to scream. My heart hurts so, but I won't give Samadar that satisfaction. He set this up for his own personal enjoyment, a double-featured treat. Not only Colossus being killed, but us watching it happen. All right, creep. You got your giggles. Enjoy them while you can. Then it'll be my turn." Okay, so she's going to be looking for payback. And then we have a reveal here, because Admiral Samadar has given off some negative vibes, let's put it that way, over the course of the previous couple of issues. And now it's revealed that he's working in cahoots with Deathbird, and he's her operative aboard the Shi'ar starship. And he reports to her about failing to prevent the Starjammers from rescuing the X-Men, and she's unhappy. She says to him, "Did you even try, Samadar? No matter, leave the Starjammers and their fate to me. The Earth is your responsibility. You've been well paid, Admiral." So he's venal, he's been paid off to betray Lilandra, and is in the employ of Deathbird. And she says, "I expect value for my money, and one way or the other, I shall have it." So he's hovering in orbit over Earth, and the idea is that if Lilandra isn't brought aboard his ship, then the Earth will be destroyed within that 24-hour period. But now the scene switches to the Starjammer ship. No, sorry, not the Starjammer ship, but rather Deathbird's ship. So this is the one that destroyed that building. It had been built covertly behind the facade of the construction of the building opposite the Marvel Comics offices in Midtown Manhattan. And here it is, and it is not quite at warp drive, so it's explained in the dialogue as to why that is. And aboard the ship is Professor X. He was abducted by Deathbird in the previous issue, and this is a really interesting bit here, where as he comes to consciousness again, images skitter across his consciousness. He is a telepath, and as such, it is natural for his mind and its size senses to wake before his body. So that's an interesting detail. Claremont always thinking out like how these powers might work, what the little details and subtleties of the powers could be, and I like that coming out here in the exposition. To wake before his body, his questing thoughts reach out to a friend, that's Lilandra, and embrace a nightmare, a fiend from the abyss. He cries out, his scream choking in his throat as his eyes fly open to behold the face of the woman he loves. So he's coming to there. I like the way that Janice Chang has indicated that in the lettering. The lettering there is kind of wobbly and shaky, just as he's coming through, or coming to rather. And it's drugs. He was drugged, so the drugs are wearing off, and then he kisses Lilandra, but in his thoughts, he thinks, I've psi-scanned Lilandra completely and found no psychic anomalies. It is her. The mental images I saw must have been hallucinations. I'm still uneasy. Why? Well, he has every right to be, but we won't discover exactly what was going on here in the images, with like half of Lilandra's face a brood and the other half herself, and then coalescing into her usual form. So what is going on will be explained in the subsequent issue. So it's a surprise for that issue to come. So they talk a bit here about what's happened to this point. And it's also interesting here, I think, that, let's see, yeah, so there's some catching up going on in regards to Colossus. And so Professor X here thinks that Colossus is dead. And he says here, he says, I marvel at the good fortune which brought us together. I too mourn for those we've lost, but for all the grief that has followed us, that may yet follow us, I would not exchange our love for anything, nor would I, she says. So Deathbird arrives, and she says, truly, little sister, then cede me your throne, and I will grant you a lifetime of peace and love. It is such a simple bargain. I care for power, not love. You for love, not power. This gives us both our heart's desire. That seems reasonable. But we learn here as Lilandra jumps towards Deathbird that Deathbird killed their mother, their sisters. Deathbird is the elder sister, the firstborn. The only thing I'll give you, she says, is a speedy journey through the gates of death. So that's why she calls her a matricide. And Deathbird easily knocks Lilandra to the ground. And she says to Professor X, don't be alarmed, Xavier. Her wounds are superficial. There's a typo there in the lettering. Are superficial. Though, had I wished my pinion spurs could have cut her to the bone, I was firstborn of the Aerie. It is I who should wear the crown, and I who will. And so Professor X puts it together. So Deathbird is Shi'ar. So Deathbird originated outside of the X-Men comics, but she has been brought in as part of the Shi'ar mythos. And so it's all been revealed here. And this is really, really interesting stuff and very thoughtful from Claremont. And Lilandra continues and says, for her unforgivable crime, killing their mother, she was stripped of rank and name, cast out of Aerie forever. As a hatchling, I worshipped her. I'm Magistrix Shi'ar. As long as I live, she cannot become empress. So there is this filial or sibling rivalry between them, and it all turns on their different personalities and characters and the fact that Deathbird killed their mother. So then we switch scenes to the Starjammer. I really like that opening shot there, and Claremont has called this like observation deck, and the screen in front of it on these spaceships an observation blister, which I like that terminology. So here we have a moment between father and son, because Cyclops has recently learned in Uncanny X-Men 154 that Corsair is his father indeed, and we get a little reprise of Cyclops's origin story, but also what happened to his father. So I like this from Claremont. So we get like a full account of what happened with Christopher Summers and his family. I was an Air Force test pilot, he says, returning from leave in Alaska, a camping trip with your grandparents to join Project Mercury as an astronaut. That's interesting. But the layout here, sometimes Cockrum's layouts don't 100% work. They send your eye this way when you should be going down here. Your mother, Catherine Ann, you, your brother Alex, and myself were flying an old de Havilland Mosquito I'd rebuilt. We were following the coast south of Cape Yakataga when we got a panic call from Anchorage about an unidentified contact heading our way. So this massive starship, the next thing we knew, it was right on top of us. I tried to report the sighting, and the ship opened fire. I was the best pilot alive, flying one of the finest birds ever built. That combination, plus a lot of luck, saved us during the initial salvos. And he continues and says, unfortunately, the Mosquito is a wooden aircraft that proved our undoing. A near miss torched the fuselage, and the dogfight was as good as over. So this is just I'm intrigued by this, the way that Claremont has built up Corsair's character here. Like, he's an ace test pilot. He's en route to join Project Mercury as an astronaut, and he's built his own plane. Restored it, an old de Havilland Mosquito, and part of it is made of wood, and he's up against this starship here, and he's holding his own. Like, that's fantastical, but like appropriate for this kind of fiction. But it really does kind of cast Corsair in a superlative light. You know, he truly is qualified to be what he is here, captain of a starship in his own right. It's almost as if like it was his destiny. So I like that from Claremont. And then we get the bit about this is on the other side of that. How could it be that there's only one parachute on the plane? And whose responsibility would that be? Well, that's Christopher's responsibility. Like, am I overreading it to infer that, you know, we could say that he's so confident, like he's such a hotshot pilot, that he doesn't even conceive that the plane could possibly crash? So there's only one parachute aboard. Like, he was so cocky, he never thought to ensure that there was enough parachutes should anything go wrong, and so there's only one aboard. But that certainly could be, I think, that blame could be laid on him, that there weren't more parachutes there. In any case, his wife and himself, they think their children dead because the parachute, the canopy catches fire, and then they're beamed aboard the starship, and it turns out it was a Shi'ar scouting mission. To them, Anne and I were zoological specimens representing the higher orders of life on Earth. We were separated. And now we shift into real Flash Gordon type territory. On the Imperial throne world, I escaped the slave pens and set out to find her. She was with the Emperor. My mistake then was in trying to kill him with my bare hands instead of shooting him down where he stood. And implied in the art is that the Emperor is attempting to rape Corsair's wife. So, like, this is heavy stuff in the backstory. And, you know, you have to put it together what's going on here. As an adult reader, you can understand the implication of what's happening here. Maybe as a 10-year-old, you don't quite 100% get what's going on. So the guards came to his rescue. They wanted to execute me on the spot, but Duquesne had other ideas. And this is terrible. So, this female is important to you, Barbarian? Yes, he says. Would you die for her? Yes. Such noble sentiments. The penalty for your crimes is death by slow torture. But that is too quick. I want you to suffer, Barbarian. So then he stabs Cyclops' mother and Alex's mother and Corsair's wife right in the chest. And suffer you shall by remembering this moment for the rest of your days. So that really is terrible stuff. And you can see it on his face. A good expression on his face. And interesting that Cyclops is saying nothing here as well. Because, of course, Cyclops is, you know, memories of his parents are spotty. His relationship to them, nothing for 20 years. And so he's that little bit more emotionally separate from all of this. So Corsair continues with his story, and he says, I was sentenced to the Star Pits. There I met Chode, Raza and Hepzibah. We became comrades, then friends. Eventually, we stole the Starjammer and escaped. We've been fighting the Empire ever since. So they're rebels against an Empire. So recalling Star Wars, elements of Star Wars there as well. Fighting, I used to hate it. That's why I became a test pilot, then joined NASA. I love flying, learning, not killing. I yearn to be a scientist, not a warrior. Look at me now. So the circumstances made him into a warrior, but it isn't who he was meant to be. And at the same time, there's this sense of like a tragic destiny, that there is some meaning to the fact that he is captain of the Starjammer. So they're interrupted by Hepzibah. I like the way that Claremont develops a particular style of talking for Hepzibah and the other members of the Starjammers that implies their alien language translated into English. Tender scene, pity to break it up, Judy calls. Deathbird's ship on short-range scanners. Intercept imminent. Interested? Very, says Corsair. I like that little panel. I like that little interchange of dialogue there as well. And the design of her battlesuit is interesting with this helmet too, this cat-like helmet. And then we get some information about Hepzibah here in the third-person narration. Led by Mamselle Hepzibah, the only female member of the crew, rebellious scion of the feline race that once vied with the avian Shi'ar for control of their galaxy. The two men repaired to the Starjammer's bridge, Scott marveling at how so vast a spaceship could be operated by so few people. Yes, indeed. So there, they've caught up with Deathbird's ship, and of course aboard that is Lilandra and Professor X. So again, you get a sense of scale here, the difference between the Starjammer and this teeny tiny ship that was the size of a skyscraper in Manhattan. And here's the letters page. So the letters page is coming in the middle of the issue. That's an unusual disposition, but there's a good reason for that. And that's on the page turn. You get a big surprise on the page turn, a double page spread. But first of all, I just want to talk about how the letters here have to do with issue 150. Also interesting that a correspondent wrote in to say that he didn't like Kitty's disco costume and he's designed his own, and they've actually printed it here and colored it. That's really cool. So this is Arthur Wong's costume design for Kitty Pryde, and then they decided they'll run a little competition in the letters page for other readers to send in designs for a costume for Kitty. And here we've got the statement of ownership, and so you can actually see to what the print run on the comic was at this time. So the print run was on average 414,000 copies printed, and the single issue nearest to filing date 450,900, so almost 451,000. So the sales are going up. They're going up all the time. This is Marvel's best-selling title in this particular period of time. So here we go. So the Starjammer is caught up with Deathbird's ship. Great. Turn the page. Wow, look at this. What an impact that has. So everybody's in shock. And their alarm sounds on the Starjammer. And Hepzibah's taken aback as well. How could we have missed such a thing? So obviously this massive living starship was cloaked. And Corsair says, by the stars, I'd heard the legends of such a craft, but I never believed. So this is a really, really cool piece of design by Dave Cockrum. Dave Cockrum, you know, he's the co-creator of the Starjammers, the creator of their visual look, the creator of the visual look of Shi'ar tech, and now he's created this design for this star shark that is the living, moving ship of the Brood. And you can see these blister cities here as well, popping out of the surface, the skin surface of this creature. It's like a hammerhead shark in its design. And then here we have a couple of panels as the Starjammer and Deathbird's ship are swallowed up by it with casual, contemptuous ease. Both the Starjammer and its prey are overtaken and swallowed. Deep within the gargantuan vessel, matter extrudes from interior walls to form docking cradles beneath the two ships. Simultaneously, a hollow pseudopod slams against the Starjammer's primary airlock. All aboard know what that means. So well done. I love the prose style there, and Claremont coming up with language in order to explain what's going on. Yeah, it's really great stuff. It is just so well written and drawn. This is Cockrum and Claremont working incredibly well together at this point in Cockrum's second run. And then we get this shot of the Brood, and they're the ones who are ready to board the Starjammer, but they're taken by surprise by the arrival of Colossus. So Colossus is healed, and he's out for Deathbird's blood, and he's backed up there by Wolverine and Raza. So these three go to town, so to speak, against the Brood. That's a great little panel there of Colossus and Wolverine tangling with the Brood. And here comes the rest of the Starjammers and Storm as well. And interesting here in the lettering that we have a special alphabet for whatever this little creature is on Chode's shoulder. And he's like a cheerful buccaneer. Cheer up, my friends, he says. The odds are only 1,000,000 to 1 against us. That makes it a fair fight. So that's funny stuff. Now, Storm has a moral quandary in this issue. She is against killing the Brood because they're living, sentient beings. But Chode basically says, you hold back, Wind Rider. A noble gesture, also a mistake. Show the Brood the same mercy they would accord you. But Storm is determined that there's a gentler way, but she's going to learn that maybe that's not the case against some foes. What happens here as well is that the fight and the laser fire gets a reaction from the starship here. Storm bridles. I'll pick up from here. They get a respite, however, it's a brief one, but the reaction comes not from the Brood cadres, busy regrouping for another assault, but from the alien vessel itself, which bucks and twists like a wild bronco, as if the firefight within was causing it physical pain. This is an interesting dimension of this fight. And then this is another great establishing shot here. So we get into one of those blister cities, far from the battle in one of the dome cities that dot the vessel's hull. We have the Brood, and they're intelligent beings. But look again at Cockrum's design for the buildings and structures of the Brood civilization. Like really inventive stuff. So good. And kind of, I think, basing these on wasps' nests, I feel. So there's a little bit of dialogue here between these two Brood. One is the clan master, and he's the one making the executive decisions. He says, establish a zero gravity environment in the combat zone. That should hamper the mammal's effectiveness, and indeed it does. But Storm is still able to maneuver using her powers, and Raza fits an anti-gravity shoe to Colossus's feet, so they're back in the fight again. And then the scene switches to Deathbird's ship. So the Brood on board are coming to kill Professor X and Lilandra. And where have Cyclops and Corsair gotten to? Because we haven't seen them here. Well, they were on their own little mission to get aboard Deathbird's ship. And so they arrived just in the nick of time to take out the Brood. And so the professor there, delighted to see them. Lilandra too, she recognizes Corsair, and he says, at your service, Magistrix, for the present. Okay, because he has been fighting the Empire for 20 years. And this is an interesting little bit. And again, this goes to what I was saying earlier about, I wonder, with the Marvel style, was there some little differences between Claremont and Cockrum? Because Cockrum in the art has the professor use his power to, remember, it's zero gravity environment. So he's floating towards a Brood that was sneaking up behind Corsair and Cyclops. And he punches it with his fist. And like, this is kind of unbelievable. Like, the professor has no super strength or anything. And you can see here, well, rather we get it on the next page in the dialogue. We get it in the dialogue from Cyclops as regards the foolhardiness of what the professor has done. He says to them, what do you think you're doing, attacking those horrors with your bare hands? They could have ripped you to shreds. You aren't trained for this line of work, Charles. That's a little error there, because Cyclops, yeah, he doesn't address the professor as Charles. He doesn't address him in that familiar fashion. But I wonder, is it, can we attribute it to a bit of characterization, that he's so upset that he slips up and uses his first name? Anyway, the professor says, perhaps I acted hastily and carelessly, Cyclops, and for that I apologize, but the creatures threaten me, threaten the woman I love. I could no longer sit idly by and do nothing, whatever the consequences. I had to act. And I like this little bit from Claremont in terms of what Lilandra says. It was a splendid, foolish gesture, my love, and I shall treasure it forever. So that worked out well for the professor there. And Cyclops thinks to himself, I can't blame him, really. In his shoes, I'd probably have done the same. But as I said, I just wonder, was Claremont looking at this and thinking, how am I gonna explain this? Like, what is Professor X doing punching out a brood? But it's a good thing he came up with if he had to come up with it on the fly over the artwork. So now the two teams meet up, and Storm is tackling Deathbird on her own, and Deathbird throwing those spears at Storm, but the spear hits the inside of the starship, and Storm realizes that, she sees the blood oozing from the wall, and this distracts her. Blood, this ship is no construct, no monstrous alien mechanism. Goddess, be merciful, this vessel is a living being. And you can see, again, good expression on her face in Cockrum's pencils there and Wiacek's inks. So that gives Deathbird an opportunity to boot Storm in the gut. And then she orders a portal opened in the side wall of the living starship. At Deathbird's shouted command, a portion of the wall irises open, creating a momentary, nigh irresistible whirlpool of air that sweeps the semi-conscious Storm out of the docking bay, shades of Alien there, and into space. And like a reversal of Alien, she's the alien creature to all of these other beings. And so now she's out in space. She's out in a vacuum and absolute zero. How on earth is she going to survive this? But the two teams, they're back aboard the Starjammer, and Waldo gives an analysis that they've got 30 seconds to rescue Storm from space, otherwise she'll die. So we've got a countdown here in a color hold, and it continues on the next page. Once we get past this, you can see it here counting down 29, 28, all the way down to 2 here. So we've got 3 panels. So the Starjammer is still aboard the Starshark, and it basically crashes out the side of the Starshark, and they grab Storm with the transporter tractor. Well, I think it's just a transporter beam. I actually like the outline here of Storm in space. I think that's really nicely done. And then they're away, and Storm is all right, much later and far away. So Storm is recovered. She was in that medical pod, and she's grateful for feeling anything at all. And yeah, so Scott's plan worked to perfection, says the professor. Deathbird's ship, the big one, was crippled into the bargain, so it's not pursuing them. It's not a spacecraft, Professor, says Storm, but a living creature. In saving you and Lilandra, we may have done it mortal harm. Alive, the professor is surprised at that. But how could the brood control such an entity? Is it sentient? And if so, is it their willing partner or their slave? Good questions. So Waldo explains. The latter, I think, Professor. I ran a sensor scan while we were inside the entity. Indications are that it was intelligent, but that most of its higher order brain functions, its consciousness, its self-awareness, have been deliberately destroyed. And then Corsair asks the operative question about their condition, the Starjammer ship, and Waldo says, it could be worse. We suffered some damage. I estimate it'll take us 24 hours to effect repairs and return to Earth. Not enough time. Lilandra makes the point that they've only got 6 hours. And if they cannot contact Araki, Chancellor Araki, and assure him that she's safe, he will destroy the Earth. I'm sorry, Magistrix, says Waldo, but there's no way the Starjammer can reach there in time. If we are Terra's only hope, then I'm afraid that planet may well be doomed. Okay, so a cliffhanger to end with. Next, hide and seek, a matter of life and death. So this issue, interesting, opened with a lot of catch up on the previous 2 parts. That's a risk of having a 4-part storyline in an era where Jim Shooter's demanding that every issue be open to a new reader. And so you have to have all that catch up in flashbacks and in dialogue between characters. But then we moved into action around the middle of the comic, and that was a great little surprise, that double page spread. And they thought about that at the level of moving the letters page to that point so we could have that surprise. It was really nicely done. It was a great dramatic effect. And then it was all action right to the end here. So a really good issue, I think. Let me know what you think of this particular issue in the comments section to the video. And if you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like the video on YouTube. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.